for however long we take, and we have the room all night. So anyway, but anyway, want to talk about these newborn baby pigs and truly put a focus on that as from that day one all the way through that weaning process. And I've shared with a couple people last week I was at, there's a project that's called Pig Livability. And it's a grant that Kansas State and Iowa State's working on that's talking about ways that we can increase the livability of our pigs. And it hit me hard, and this has kind of been weighing on me. So this is kind of like a lot of what we talk about tonight of trying to keep pigs alive. Because I don't know if everybody knows this, but in the United States, 1/3 of every pig that is born dies before it reaches harvest. Okay. And I think that about the advances that we have in technology of everything that we do, that we need to be better than that. And things that we can focus on and do to improve and decrease the mortality of our pigs, from sows to newborns to pre-wean to weans to grow finish. Everything that we can do in that regard is going to make us better and make us better financially, and then make us better stewards of the animals that we serve and take care of on our farms on a daily basis. Just to get going, I want to say thank you to Carrie Ritalik for putting the meal together, and for Carrie and Morgan Bowe for providing the meal, the Wisconsin Pork Association, at all my events. So give them a round of applause. And then Carrie's specialty is the food. Morgan's our young techie person, making sure that the people that are joining us on Zoom get to see everything, and so on and so forth. So anyway, with that, and I don't think he's quite ready to go yet, our first speaker. So we got a little bit of time. If you want to get another plate, grab a cookie, grab something else to drink. Our first speaker is Dr. Jason Gephardt, and he's going to join us on Zoom. But he is a doctor at Kansas State University, and Brian sports his Kansas State gear. He has a daughter that's actually attending there right now. So anyway, and but Dr. Jason's presented some data of 4 or 5 research studies that grad students have been working on at Kansas State on that early pig and different things to help them gain more, to live more, and so on and so forth. So he was on that program last week, and asked him to join us, and that will be the first off right off the bat. So until we get him loaded up, just want to anybody have any questions about? We've got 3 or 4 speakers. Please, this is a small informal group. If you got a question, you got a thought, you got a comment, speak up and give it. Because the best thing that we do, and Nancy and I were talking about this before the start of the meeting, because there's a core of us that's been to most of my events. This is about the usual size that we get. And but one of the benefits of having these live in-person things is it's therapy for us, with all of us that have pigs at home. And it's kind of nice to talk with others and say, oh, we're not the only one that has this all screwed up, or we're not the only one that has this problem, or we're not the only one that this has happened to. And so anyway, it's nice to be able to share and learn from each other as well. So with that, we're going to wait like 3 or 4 minutes until we get Dr. Gephardt loaded up, and then we'll get on with the program.
We want to do some introductions to kind of know who's here.
What's that?
Introductions to know who's here.
Like
People to say their name, where they're from.
we could. Do you want to wait to wait for him to finish the end, and we'll do
We could do it right now.
Yes. Were you gonna do it?
We've got, Morgan's got a couple WPA announcements, so we're gonna go ahead and get that in here at the first. And get that, and things that they want to share with you.
All right, thanks again, everybody, for coming. Just a couple of announcements, so then at the end, you guys can dash out of here, but, we do have a bunch of handouts and supplies in the back of the room. So we've got new biosecurity signs that you guys can put outside your buildings. There's some membership forms, sponsorship forms, rebate applications, all sorts of stuff there. Wisconsin is in a sustainability grant program, so you are able to get grant dollars for implementing certain practices in your barns or in your fields. So if you have questions about that, there's handouts in the back and we can help get you signed up for that as well. And then also the US SHIP program is kind of helping with foreign animal disease preparedness and response. And so if anybody wants to get enrolled in that program, feel free to find Jerry or myself. And that's meant for if there's an outbreak that should get, being in that program will get you a movement permit more quickly. And then one other item, and then I'll see if Carrie's got anything, but Corn Soy Expo is January 29th and 30th. So pork is the third commodity at that event. So we'll have our annual meeting on Thursday, the 29th. And then we'll have breakout sessions all day. There's going to be 4 pork specific breakout sessions. And then there's also a lot of general agronomic ones as well. And then we have our Young Leaders program. So anybody age 7 through 19 that would like to participate in that, they can. And then Bonder Ag Service is sponsoring that event. So we're excited to debut that. And we'll have Porkapalooza as well, which is kind of our main entertainment event that features pork appetizers. We'll have dueling pianos. So it's a lot of fun. We'll be sending more information out. You can also go online, but those are just a couple of housekeeping items for everybody to keep in the back of their mind. Where's that located at? That'll be at the Kalahari in Wisconsin Dells. Yeah.
I just wanted to, for those that want one of these are really nice. And just put them up on your building and they're gonna last for life. You need one of these, please grab those. And we also have our membership, and if you would like to take this with you or give it to us tonight, we'd appreciate it. We always enjoy being able to have voting privileges on here, so you're privilege. But if you need to, just put it in for non-voting. It's free to all our members. So I think it's just really important. We go to the legislature to be able to tell the producers about how many people we have there and to keep you informed of all the really good things that go on throughout the year. So please sign up for a membership and you can give that to us tonight.
All right, well, that worked out just right because Dr. Gebhardt has now joined us. And so we'll be getting him geared up here. Just a brief introduction. As like I said, I heard him give this speech a week ago at the Pig Livability Conference and thought it was really good, valuable data. So kind of fresh and hot off the press of some data that he's going to share. But Dr. Gebhardt is a native of Western Michigan and grew up on a small family farm and a local feed mill. And he obtained his bachelor's from Michigan State University. And then he went on to there and has got his PhD in applied swine nutrition, also a DVM from Kansas State University. And so he is the associate professor within the Department of Diagnostics and Medicine and Pathology at Kansas State University. A great representative for the swine industry and good common sense, useful information that Dr. Gebhardt's going to share. So with that, we'll get you all loaded up and the floor is yours, Dr. Gebhardt.
Sounds wonderful, and appreciate the invitation and the chance to join with the audience here this evening. And as mentioned, I'm here at K-State and really work with an awesome group of faculty. Came out and I did my training out here and had the ability to work with Dr. Tokash, Dr. Goodban, Darushi, Woodworth, and been on faculty now for about 5 years, and really appreciate the opportunity to be able to continue to work with students and help answer questions and really try to be very applied in nature of understanding what challenges pork producers are facing and how can we develop knowledge to improve practices of swine producers and ultimately help the pig and help the pig producer. So this is some information. We'll cover a lot of ground real quick. And this information is shared at the Pig Livability Conference recently held in Omaha. That recording, as well as all the other recordings from that conference, will be on the Pig Livability website here in the coming weeks. So a really nice resource of a lot of content that was presented at that conference. And as we show you here with the last slide that we'll wrap up the conversation with, all the material and all the research that I'll talk through, we have presented in a few different formats. We have fact sheets, short informational videos.
Hey, Dr. Gephardt, just 1 second here. I'm just trying to switch your audio over here, so sorry about that.
No worries.
Okay. All right. Go ahead here. I won't screw with it, so sorry about
Is that
that.
better?
Yep, you're good. Go ahead.
Wonderful. So all the resources are available on the Pig Livability website. So we'll cover a lot of ground, talk about some research topics at a pretty high level, but more information on all of these different research projects can be found on that Pig Livability website. The focus of our discussion here, the information that I'll talk through, really is on the post-weaning pig, nursery, grow finish, wean to finish, really focused on that transition from weaning into being successful in the nursery or in the wean to finish barn. One of the first projects that I'll share looked at different ways of creep feeding, pre-weaning, so still in the farrowing crate with their mother. How can we practically and in a simple way provide creep feed without the hassle of creep bowls or troughs or pieces of PVC pipe that have been cut in half? Can we put creep feed directly onto the mat in the farrowing stall, and what impact would that have? So one of the creep feed treatments was a standard 0.32 centimeter pellet, a large pellet that was about just over 1 centimeter, or a treatment that we used was to take lactation diet directly. So right out of the sow's feeder and provide that directly onto the mat. And the concept with that treatment was it's already there. We don't have to bring in special diets into the farm. We don't have to worry about the biosecurity associated with that. We'll use the feed that's already there to feed the sow. What happens if we provide that on the mat as a form of mash-based creep feed? So then we took those pigs, we weaned those pigs, and we followed them into the nursery. This data looks at during the nursery phase, the percentage of pigs that either resulted in a mortality or were removed from their experimental pen. We had a treatment that did not have any creep feed, the standard pellet, the large pellet, or the pigs that were provided lactation feed as a form of creep feeding. What was a little bit interesting to us was that the mortality and removal percentage was actually greater for pigs that were provided the lactation diet compared to being provided a large pellet with either no creep feed or the standard pellet being intermediate between those two. Still some questions remained as a result of that. Was it the diet composition itself? Was it the feed form? What exactly caused that? But removals and mortality, we saw that. And also looking at average daily gain within the nursery period. So this would be the first 36 days in the nursery. In addition to having higher removals and mortality, we also saw a reduction in average daily gain of those pigs compared to no creep or feeding either one of the pellet size treatments. Some small benefits, not statistically significant, but some small benefits perhaps in reducing the percentage of pigs resulting in mortality and removal removals when feeding the large pellet, but based on the statistics, no evidence of a difference between those treatments. But what this data set did show is that although feeding lactation feed directly on the mat certainly is convenient, from a growth performance or livability perspective, we didn't see any benefit with it. And actually, we saw some worsening of performance when that lactation diet was used for that purpose. Then transitioning from the concept of crate feeding still in the farrowing stall, what happens if we provide a similar large cube, and almost like range cubes or cattle cubes, very large, about 3/4 of an inch in diameter, about 2 inches long? What would happen if we take those and we put them in the pan of the feeder in the nursery? Or what if we throw them directly onto the plastic flooring in the nursery? Would that act as a way to entice pigs to get to the feeder to help stimulate feed intake shortly after weaning? So this was just one measurement of many measurements that were conducted in the study. But what it showed was that if pigs post-weaning were provided that large cube, we saw a reduction in the percentage of pigs that lost weaning in the first 7 days after weaning compared to pigs that did not or were not provided that large cube after weaning. We didn't see any differences, any meaningful differences in growth performance, average daily gain, or feed efficiency, but we did see that reduction in pigs losing weight. Our theory being pigs almost use this like a chew toy. They run around like a dog with a chew toy, and it's large enough that it doesn't fall through the flooring. So it stays in the pen for actually quite a while, several hours, before it gets soft enough that it is either fully consumed or falls through the flooring. What we think is happening is that that texture of having something in their mouth is allowing those pigs to go to the feeder a little bit more rapidly and reducing the percentage of pigs that lose weight in the first week after weaning, as shown in the data there. So some nice data that's been around for several years, but one of the challenges that producers are facing was it's really hard to get feed mills to make a pellet that large. So this information was shared at the first pig livability conference about 4 years ago. And as an outcome of that, and producers being interested in that, this is a nice example of research being identified by stakeholders in the industry, and then taking that research, implementing it into action. So this was an example of a company, Devonish. They took that data, they found out refined their internal process to actually manufacture that cube on a commercial scale, and now it's available for the industry. So a nice story of taking research and driving implementation within the swine industry as a part of the research generated from the Pig Livability Project. Next research area, also early on in the nursery, focused on mat feeding. So mat feeding would be taking a small amount of feed out of the feeder, placing it directly onto the flooring of that nursery pen, and again, with the goal being to stimulate feed intake, get pigs exposed to that diet, and hopefully drive them to the feeder to begin increasing their feed intake after weaning. So a total of 3 experiments were done. Mat feeding, no mat feeding, in experiment 1 with a pellet, factorial, looking at either a pellet as the diet form or a crumble, or small or large pellets in combination with no mat feeding. So several different experiments, but when put together and say, what is the impact of mat feeding versus no mat feeding, we saw about a 1.3% reduction in mortality and removals during the nursery period. So any of those trials individually, there's enough variation, the response is small enough that we didn't find statistically significant differences. But when these data are put together, mat feeding definitely can be a strategy that helps increase feed intake, reduce morbidity and mortality, a small response, but a meaningful response. So at SLAT level, certainly can be a strategy that we should be exploring when thinking of ways to get those pigs started post-weaning. Another strategy early post weaning, the concept of gruel feeding. So taking feed, mixing it with a liquid, and that can be simply water, that can be water and electrolytes. There's a variety of different palatants that are used. But taking feed, mixing it with a liquid to provide it in a slightly different form, hopefully to allow those pigs to consume it more readily than if they were eating or consuming dry feed in the feeder alone. So in this study, what we did was a very, very large nursery facility in Nebraska. We took the bottom 10% of pigs placed into the nursery. So every fill group, we would take the bottom 10% of pigs, put them in a pen by themselves. So in total, that represented just over 3,000 pigs. And what we wanted to know was gruel feeding frequency. So is there a benefit to gruel feeding those pigs, those small population of pigs, 4 times a day, or is 2 times a day appropriate, or is that enough? And this really is a labor issue. Can doing it that additional 2 times, going from 2 to 4 times, certainly takes time, and that's time that a caretaker has to give up. There's an opportunity cost associated with that. So what we wanted to do is understand, is feeding gruel twice a day or 4 times a day preferable within this population of small pigs? And the way that gruel is put together, the first 5 days after placement, so day 0 to 5, the ratio was 3 parts water to 1 part feed. So a more liquid consistency. From day 6 to 10, that texture was changed to about a 1-to-1 ratio of water to feed. And then later on, the ratio is inverse, so 1 part water to 3 parts feed, to try to transition that to a more dry gruel feed that then, when removed after day 14, hopefully the pigs will jump right in and transition right to the feeder. A variety of different ways that this ratio can look. Lots of different practices out there. I don't think there's a clear best or worst. This is the approach that several production systems implement, and this is one that we used as part of the research trial. But certainly there are personal preferences that folks would have in terms of exactly how to do it. But really, we wanted to know, is twice a day or 4 times a day better? So then when we follow those pigs, the graph on the left represents the percentage of pigs that were removed from that test pen and had to go be placed in a hospital pen for additional treatment, additional intervention. No difference in percentage of pigs that were removed, whether those pigs were gruel fed twice a day or whether they were gruel fed 4 times a day. And then looking at mortality, again, same thing, 2 versus 4 times, there was no evidence of a difference in the percentage of pigs that resulted in mortality, whether they were gruel fed or mat fed. So based on this data, it looked like as long as we were doing gruel feeding well twice a day, we didn't see any benefit to gruel feeding 4 times a day above that, which then begs a question or opens up an opportunity for what other uses of time could that caretaker be best using, or is it walking pens of pigs, identifying pigs needing to be pulled, needing to be treated, needing additional intervention? Is it focusing on barn sanitation? Is it mat feeding? Opens up some opportunities that if they don't have to do that gruel feeding 4 times a day and only twice, allows them to perform some other important tasks on the farm. Another concept that there were some good questions related to was giving oral dextrose. So a bottle of dextrose, 50% dextrose. What would happen if we pull a pig from their pen, if they needed to go to the hospital pen, if they needed additional intervention? We thought there's a high probability that those pigs are hypoglycemic or have low blood sugar. So what happens if we give them an oral drench of dextrose? On the left side, so half of the pigs, when removed from their test pen to go to the hospital pen, did not receive an oral drench of dextrose, and half of the pigs did receive an oral drench, 10 milliliters of dextrose. This represents that their blood sugar content or blood glucose change 30 minutes after that dextrose was administered or not. So what is clearly happening is that their blood sugar is increasing and increasing to a greater extent when that oral dextrose is given, but it doesn't change clinical outcome. So looking at percentage of pigs that resulted in mortality, no evidence of a difference between those two treatments. If anything, those pigs that did receive that oral dextrose resulted in slightly higher removal from their hospital pen compared to those pigs that did not, but yet again, no significant difference based on statistical analysis. So the concept makes a lot of sense. We know we can change blood sugar, but it didn't result in measurable clinical improvement in outcome for those poll pigs. Another area at the Pig Livability Conference that was discussed in quite a bit of detail was the impact of genetics on livability. Sows, we know in the genetics companies have done a nice job characterizing recently and making some changes to improve pig livability based on genetics. So this was a really cool trial that we did at our K-State University Research Farm, where we took semen from two different Duroc sire lines. One of those sire lines was selected for early maturing growth, which means a higher growth rate early on in their life stage. Think about the nursery. So these pigs would be expected to transition into the nursery, have higher nursery growth rates, but would give up a little bit of growth rate and efficiency later on in their productive cycle. The other Duroc sire line we used was what was selected for later maturing growth. So these pigs perform really, really well in the finisher. So we took our same population of sows, bred those sows to one of two of those sire lines, and then we took those offspring and we did a series of experiments all the way from mating of their mothers all the way to those piglets being born through the nursery all the way to market. So some really cool data generated as a part of that. And this is just one piece of that, where the first 14 days after those pigs were weaned, we measured feed intake on a daily basis. So pigs were housed 5 pigs in a pen. We would go in and weigh that feeder every single day for 14 days. And then we could measure feed intake grams per day represented on the vertical axis. And what we saw was even beginning as early as 2 days after weaning, feed intake for those pigs, that sire line that was selected for early maturing growth, had greater feed intake, again, beginning as early as day 2, and we saw that all the way through the first 14 days of the nursery. So based on genetics, there definitely was changes in feed intake patterns early in the nursery. And what that translated to was, if we look at the percentage of pigs that lost weight the first 3 days after weaning, those pigs that had higher feed intake or early after weaning, the first 2 days after weaning, only 5% of those pigs were lighter on day 3 after weaning than they were at the time of weaning. Where the later maturing pigs that had less average daily feed intake immediately post weaning, almost 40% of those pigs lost weight the first 3 days after weaning. So changes in feed intake, changes in body weight loss post weaning. And one of the ways that we helped to characterize this was looking at blood cortisol levels. So we took blood samples pre-weaning, did not see any difference in blood cortisol at that time, which makes a lot of sense. We also then measured a blood sample after the time of weaning, and those pigs that were selected for later maturing growth, again, lower feed intake pigs, more of those pigs losing weight immediately post-weaning, those pigs had higher serum cortisol levels, meaning that they respond to that stressful event of weaning differently between those two genetic lines. So some really fascinating information. And then if we follow those pigs all the way out to and model their growth rate about to 180 days of age, we see, so this is a growth curve based on average daily gain. We see those offspring from sire lines selected for early maturing growth had higher growth rates for about the first 2/3 of their productive cycle, whereas the later maturing pigs had higher growth rate later in their productive cycle. And really one of the incentives or one of the benefits of this later maturing genotype is shown on the right. It's feed efficiency. So from about the middle of nursery all the way through market, those offspring from sires selected for later maturing growth were more feed efficient, which when we do the economic calculations has significant impacts. I think this was pretty eye-opening for the genetics companies to understand that we can chase a certain target, but what also are we giving up in the process? If we look for lifetime feed efficiency, try to only focus on the economic value of that, what are we giving up in early growth, that transition from the sow into the nursery? Are we impacting livability of that pig? So with some really nice data to help characterize that then allows genetics companies to have a more diversified or more robust approach to their genetic selection indexes to ultimately create the best pig for the producer. So through all that research, those field trials, very large numbers of pigs, these feeding and management strategies, we know that we can successfully reduce the percentage of pigs that lose weight after weaning. We can reduce morbidity and mortality rates in the nursery. And by doing so, we can increase caretaker involvement. But those impacts don't generally have a huge impact on growth rate. We can't measure it in body weight change very often. And a lot of that is because the feed intake of those pigs is inherently so low, with the exception of the differences in genetic selection that we talked about. And really importantly, some awesome data that was presented at the Pig Livability Conference focused on health status of the mortality and wean to finish production. So after the time a pig is weaned, about 68% of the mortality after weaning can be explained by factors that happened at the sow farm. So sow farm health, the productivity of that sow farm, a variety of other factors have a huge impact on downstream wean to finish livability. So sow farm health and sow farm productivity is a really important metric to evaluate and to try to get the sow farm healthy, because that allows everything else downstream to operate much better. And then finally, to wrap up, with all the research our group at K-State has been with, partners at Iowa State have conducted a ton of research in this area as well. These are some areas that have been shown to move the needle on wean to finish survivability. Sow farm health, that we briefly mentioned how important that is, the genetic influence we talked about, some biscuit enrichment work that was done at Iowa State, similar to the concept of the large cattle cube that we showed, pellet size, mat feeding, sensory attractants, essential fatty acids. All of these, through different research projects, have been shown to have a benefit. I think equally as important to the things that work, what are the things that people try and they don't measure positive outcomes? I think that's good to recognize. Those non-positive outcomes are not always being a benefit. Doesn't mean that in all situations those strategies wouldn't work. But I do think it is important to recognize where people have tried, where there hasn't been a benefit shown. Can we tweak the way that research was done? Or do we need to go a different direction and try something different? So here's just a few examples of those. The gruel frequency twice a day or 4 times a day we talked about, oral dextrose to fall back pigs, and then several other strategies as well. And the great part about this project, collaboration with Iowa State, Purdue University, and then our team at K-State, all of the research that's been generated as part of the project can be found at the piglivability.org website. We have the PigX podcast with a new episode that comes out about once a month, a series of fact sheets available both in English and Spanish, some producer tools, some economic decision tools. What's the cost of mortality, both in the sow herd, but also on the wean to finish side. And a lot of the research projects have short videos describing what was done, what were some of the key findings of that project. So with that, appreciate the time and the opportunity to share some thoughts and what we've been doing as part of the Pig Livability Project. And we're happy to answer any questions and continue the dialogue.
Thank you, Dr. Gebhardt. We'll turn it to the crowd here and see what we've got for questions.
Any questions? all of this been done in confinement, or is there any research on pasture pork in like the same sort of?
Did you
Yeah,
pick all that up? Okay, great.
Yep, I did. Yep, great question. So all of this research has been focused on pigs raised in confinement facilities, so indoors in on concrete flooring, plastic flooring in the nursery. All of this research would not be any more from extensive systems in terms of outdoor access or anything like that. Great question.
Anybody else? I've got a couple.
Yeah, can't let me off that easy.
Okay, so two questions. The first one on the genetic study. My question is, and maybe I just missed it, but is there any data on mortality or removals based on those two? Because my initial thought is, as I sit here and think about those early maturing lines, that their early feed intake is better, that maybe their nursery mortality would be lower. But was that measured at all?
Great question, and we did measure it. And that study was done at our university facility. So that group of pigs that were created from those two different sire line matings created a group of about 400 pigs. With that size of a population, the mortality differences were so low, and at reasonably high health university-based research farm, we didn't find any significant differences in mortality. I think the concept is exactly right. I do think that would translate to that response being present, earlier maturing growth, greater early feed intake. I would imagine a greater level of nursery survivability. We just weren't able to capture that or to quantify that with the sample size that we had here at the university.
Okay, so second question, and I teased a couple people about the large cube for baby pigs, and initial reaction of what I had and what anybody that I ever share that with is it's kind of like smile, almost laugh, and say that doesn't work. Well, your data proves or says differently. Are there any commercially other than Devonish? Are there other companies that are looking at either have that on the market or looking to do that?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any others. One of the challenges with that is feed millers do not like it. The ability with that diet composition to pass that through a pellet die that large, it is not easy to do. So the data was there, quite favorable, but it was several years before we could get a large enough quantity to actually implement it in the field. So I'm not aware of others looking at it since that one particular group had rolled it out at Pork Expo. I'm sure there probably is interest in others in that area. I'm not aware of any others in the market, but that's an interesting concept too. And I wish we would have videos of it, but it really is like a puppy with a chew toy. They pick it up and they run around with it. So there's also a social dynamic within the pen as they're interacting with that large cube. Sounds cheesy, but I really do think there's something to having that texture in their mouth, that flavor in their mouth, and yeah, the data is pretty favorable, and I think it does confirm that we think of nursery pigs in micro pellets, really, really small pellets, because the pig can chew it better and can consume it better. A lot of the data would say that those really small pellets really aren't needed. More of a traditional, what we think of is a pellet. Nursery pigs can do very, very well on. Now, this is kind of an extreme with that range cube type size, but I think across several of those studies, the pigs tell us that they really don't need that tiny micro pellet that we think of in terms of ability to chew it and interact and consume with it.
Where would you purchase a large pellet?
Yep.
Available.
Not here.
Yeah, that's the thing,
Yeah,
like, so
yeah.
it's not available to anybody.
Oh, you just get the call Devonish, they would get it to a mill wherever you want.
Dr. Gephardt alluded to it a little bit, but with my experience in milling and producing product, it's one thing, you know, we do runs and pellets, baking pellets is kind of a volume business. And one of the biggest downside expenses is making a die change. So if you look at, just say, okay, it does work. Probably not a believer as some other people are, but if it does work and has value, there's not enough volume there to the amount of time, effort, physical labor, cost it takes to make a die change and run. So if I take one of our facilities and go to physically change that die, I'm gonna lose about 2 to 3 hours of production. And for the volume of that feed, you can't change that die and stay in business. It's just not physically logical enough. That makes sense.
Yep, that makes perfect sense. Hits the nail on the head.
Dr. Gebhardt, looks like there is a question in the chat. Is the large pellet a behavioral issue, getting back to an instinctual rooting, grabbing?
I think there's a component of it. I really do. Seeing the pigs and how they interact with it and run around with it. I think there's a instinctual component. I think there's a social component too, that as we have a pen of pigs, they interact with it and try to keep it away from everybody else. And in the meantime, they're interacting with that material. There are some different schools of thought in terms of what the composition of that pellet should be. Likewise with crate feed and the farrowing crate. Do we need to use the same diet in terms of corn, soybean meal, specialty protein sources, the same formulation that would be used in the nursery? There are some that are very much that of the opinion that yes, that is important. I probably lean more towards that as long as they're consuming something. I think that's probably the most important piece. So there is a little bit of nutrient intake with those large pellets as they're consuming it, but I think a lot of it's just the behavioral, the social, and is that more similar to ancestrally what their instincts are? Certainly would be aligned with that, but pretty fascinating.
What are the ingredients in the pellet?
Yeah, I believe I don't know where they landed with that one that was commercially available. The one I believe we used in that research trial would be formulated very similar to an early nursery diet. So it would be a blend of corn, soybean meal, specialty protein sources, the vitamins and minerals and such. So nothing special. There's nothing magic about what the formulation is. Just a similar diet composition to what those pigs would normally be fed at that stage of life.
Any other questions? Well, thank you, Dr. Gebhardt. We sure appreciated your time and ability to share with us this evening. And I'm gonna get a bag of those cues just because I'm just amused enough with it. And I want to see my little Polands carrying big pellets around, in the farrowing crate. So anyway, we're gonna see what that looks like on my place.
Take some pictures and send
Firsthand
them
here
my
very
way.
soon.
I'll slip them into some presentations.
All right. Well, thank you for that. Appreciate you sticking around late at evening. And it means a lot for us for you to share your time.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. Have a good evening, everybody.
Okay. So I found that interesting and I'm amused more than thinking there's anything practical about that large pellet. But it's one of those things where we all sit in our head and say, no way, that can't be true, or that can't be the right thing. And then we see research that proves us that maybe it can't. So the couple of the other things is I still toy around with the whole gruel feeding thing and think about the time and labor and effort to do that to where it's going to, if it really is going to. And Dietrich's going to share with some of that with us here in the next talk. the other thing is the dextrose, that interests me, and then boom, it shows that there's really no benefits to it, because I was thinking of, like, we've all got that oral dextrose around, and to think that give that sugar high, that it might. That's another one that I thought would have shown a response, and it didn't. So anyway, just some things that are cutting edge and kind of new, and things to spur thought about what we do for that young pig. Next on the program is Dietrich Johnson with Huber Feeds. Dietrich's been here with us a time or two, and just incredible, good, solid, practical knowledge that we can use on our farms. I asked him to talk about getting that pig, that wean pig nutrition, and setting that table to where we get that pig off to a great start. We're going to have a much better finish. So again, thank you very much, Dietrich, for coming up here and being with us this evening, and we'll take it from there.
I'm gonna start before I introduce myself a little bit. Just thinking of a young Mr. Gearing, and we're talking about dextrose, and somebody's son back there I hired out of college. But one of the first things I did with your son, we dreamed up this thing, and we thought, we're gonna get better feed intakes. Got a cement mixer and some dextrose, and spent time in the back room making frosted starter feed with dextrose. Great idea, not so practical. But so I'm Dietrich Johnson. I work. Sit down, or how about you just click it?
Technology. I know, right? Glorious.
There we go. So I'm Dietrich Johnson. I'm a swine nutritionist for Huber Cow Feeds. I also have worked with a partnership part of the group called Corn Belt Livestock Services, and we're independent nutrition consulting. I work in multiple states: Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, Kentucky, Minnesota, South Dakota, Michigan, Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, and the great state of New York, believe it or not. I do business and work with clients in Saskatchewan, Ontario, and Quebec. I work anywhere from conventional farms to Prop 12 farms, Nyman producers, niche producers, and I work for 2 swine genetic companies. You want to go ahead and click that?
It's working now.
Right.
It's working now.
Is that down button?
Down button, yep.
Okay. So
We'll see.
we'll see. We'll hope.
I got your back.
So as we get started into this, we talked about piglet survivability, and Jeff and I had a conversation on a couple things, and he asked, and I wish I used different font maybe so it was a little easier for everybody to see, but before we get to the nutrition, let's look at things on how we can get pigs to survive. Wean age on piglet survivability is a big, big thing. Dr. Main in 2005 did a great study, and if you look at the difference between 12 to 21 days of weaning, day 42 post-weaning gain, those pigs, older pigs, gained 3.05 pounds more. They had a final body weight in pounds of 2.98 pounds. Wean to finish average daily gain was increased by 0.022, and that's extremely significant. And the percentage death loss actually decreased from looking at 13.5 to 21.5 days for every day, the percentage. So this isn't total percent, but like 3% take off 0.23. So each day take off 0.23 on that number. So there's a significant decrease in death loss. by getting older age pigs out there. And it's really important, you know, I heard you that you may have a niche outdoor production, and I don't know if you have sows, maybe, you have some sows?
We
Or-
have 3, this is very new, and she
Right.
decided to do it for the fair, and I don't have anywhere to put my sows. I did not think that far ahead, so now I need to put them on a pasture when they're done, and I don't know how that will
But-
affect that.
But 28-day wean is very important to you because of piglet survivability. Well, that's the downfall of that system,
Right.
but wean age is very important to you, so getting to that 28-day wean age for you is very important versus a confined operation. But even in a confined operation, getting somewhere in that 20.5 to 22 days is very significant. And there's a lot of times, like when farms, we have PRRS breaks or significant health challenges, we slow that wheel down, slow that shipment movement of pigs, and we're usually able to do that, especially in large PRRS outbreaks, because we have enough death loss, we have empty crates, but we'll try and gain and go to 22 to 24 days, because that piglet, when it's weaned, will be stronger, healthier, more viable, and be able to live through the downfalls of dealing with that virus. So it's has much more vitality and can deal with challenges. So that's very important. So another group recently did a block study on wean weight. And this was all the same wean age, but they went and blocked pigs. And normally, you know, you'll have a bell curve. So we're talking a farm here that's weaning 1,250 pigs a week. But they blocked it and they went 6 to 8 pounds, 8 to 10, 10 to 12, 12 to 14. But it shows you very much importance on working on lactation nutrition, lactation feeding. I can formulate the best diet in the world for you, but if it doesn't get made well or fed right, as in making sure there's feed in front of that sow and it's not moldy, it's clean, she's got water, it can make a big difference. But you sit there and look at 6 to 8 pound nursery death loss. Those pigs were 33%. 8 to 10 pounds was 7.6. And then when we get to the 10 to 12 pound block and 12 to 14 pound block, they really weren't any significantly different because they're 3.3 and 3.4%. So it's very important to maximize nutrition for lactation, maximize that wean weight, and try and keep that up, keep that age up, where we can get a viable pig, because we don't want a bunch of light pigs because of our lack of survivability.
If you had a bunch of light pigs, like let's say you had a mother with poor milk output, and instead of keeping them on there for 21 days, you kept them on there for 28 days to get the pigs up to 14 pounds, would that help increase the survivability?
Yes.
So essentially, if your pigs aren't big enough, just simply keep them on the mother longer.
Yes. If you farrowed and you got, you know, poor birth weights and such, or challenges, going to that 28-day average wean is going to have a lot of advantage for you.
Will it set them back further if you don't wean them until they're that old? Will it set them back later? I mean,
No, it will not set them back. They'll still grow and do
Okay.
well.
so even if
There's not a negative effect.
even if they're born small, there is a chance that they can grow at the normal rate after if you get.
No.
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 Okay.
If they're a small piglet under 3 pounds, they're not going to grow at the same rate as a piglet born 3 pounds or heavier. But if you want survivability, increase your wean age, increase your wean weight. Does that make sense? That pig has a better chance of surviving. It may survive, but to be that 290 pound pig or that shining star at the fair, it's not so much.
I just want to make sure it gets there.
Yeah, if it gets there, and if you want to, 240, 250, 260, yes. So that's pretty important. So I'm always big, and I think last time I was here, we talked a little bit about this, but quality control to me is a big deal. And, you know, I don't know how many of you are mixing your own feed or, you know, having a co-op, local feed mill, coal miller, et cetera, make your feed. But is my feed mixed properly? I spend a lot of my time, probably 20% of my time formulating diets, and the better part of 60% of my time on quality control. Did the, you know, so things that make it better to get it there, is the inclusion rate of what I'm trying to make in my feed milling equipment appropriate for the type of equipment I have? Do I know the proper mixing order and mix time for what I'm making? Fat application to the feed. If you have automated, is it calibrated? It's a big deal. There's a lot of times that you think you're putting fat on in a calibrated system and you're not. So it's very important. Mixer, regular inspections, making sure nothing's broke, your ribbon's fine, in good shape. Annual mixer study testing. All the mills that I work with, we conduct mixer study every year to check standard deviation and make sure we're mixing feed properly. And here's a big one, fat quality. You know, does my feed good? Does my fat source smell good? Rancid fat is a big detriment. It's a big detriment in lactation. It's a big detriment in nursery feed. Oxidative stress to those piglets is a big deal and causes you problems. It will increase your death loss, increase your treatments. So setting the table some more. Micron size, whether it's grow finish feed, sow feed, nursery feed is important. 600 to 700 microns with a tight SD, anything 2.3 or less down to 1.8 is great. Mycotoxins, I'm a big proponent of testing for mycotoxins. If you have sows especially, you should be testing 4 times a year. If you have sows, you should be using a mycotoxin binder in your feed all the time. And knowing your mycotoxin binder is important. Is it okay? Does that binder work with Pomatil? If you use the wrong kind of binder and you're using Pomatil in your sow feed or in your nursery feed, there are binders out there that will bind that. That's a costly mistake. So not only are you excreting Pomatil out the back door, you're not getting any benefits of that antimicrobial. So performance during lactation. So things we can do with lactation feed to influence the piglet microbiome. It's pretty important. Yeast culture, some yeast products. For those of you that have coccidiosis problems in your sows and you want to take and control that, there are a couple of yeast products on the market that are really good for coccidiosis prevention that can be added to your gestation feed and your lactation feed to help you out. Certain bacillus products, there's some really good bacilluses out there that are very, very effective at controlling Clostridium scours. Very, very good addition to your sow feed. Creep feeding, gosh, walked me right into a controversial deal already with this slide, right? So my big deal is I am not trying to add weight to those piglets. If you look at the overall research and the number of trials, the benefit to creep feeding is getting that pig accustomed to feed, but the ability to creep feed and put weight on that piglet is very, very low. So my go-to plan is the last 5 to 7 days of lactation. And I like to feed a half cup to a cup of feed per litter per day. And I like to use the same starter that I'm going to start those pigs on the nursery. because it's all about the taste. Yes, I do agree with Dr. Gephardt's comment. There's a social thing about biting and chewing. I don't know if the big pellet's a big deal, but I like to have that same feed that they're going to see in the nursery in front of them to do that. Now, one thing I don't have in my slide is how many of you people here with sows have the same rubber mats in a creep area that we've had the last 2-3 years that use rubber mats with the nice cords in them. Do you guys have scours? Do you fight scours? Does anybody fight scours in the creep area in the farrowing crate? All right. So the first advice I'll give you is go home, throw your mats out, go to Lowe's, go to Menards. They've got a very fine cardboard. It's like construction cardboard, walkway cardboard. It's about the thickness if you buy a good folded dress shirt of that piece that comes and folded in between. But you can take and cut a slice of that cardboard and slip it under your frame of your crate instead of having your mat there. And you can start pigs on that. And especially if you have scours, it's a good way to control scours because that paper will be there under the lamp. It gives them a nice warm creep area, but it will also disappear. If you want a creep feed, you're gonna have to stick another piece of paper in because that paper won't last 21 days. It'll last about 7 or 8. But it's a great.
Don't they eat it?
Oh,
They do, but they don't.
It's like a big pellet.
Yeah. It's something that goes around, it gets wet, it disappears.
Okay.
It goes away. I wouldn't say it's highly ingested, but I wouldn't be, they're pigs, they're probably gonna eat some, right? But it's a great way to control scours because especially those rubber mats, if you ever looked at them, they get cracks, they have the cords in them. Those cords are like candle wicks. So even though you washed them, you go back later, pigs can get things from that cord, and you spread E. coli, salmonella, cocci back to what you have. So, but
Feed feeding,
yeah,
so it's not for weight gain, it's exposed them to dry feed.
yes.
So is there benefit to them just running the pellets out and they all end up down in the pit underneath the crate, or?
You're going to see no matter what you do, if you put lactation feed on that mat, put crumbles on that mat, or put mini pellets on the mat, you're going to see feed on the ground and you got to walk away from it. You got to think about exposure. And that's one of the things why I talked about using that half cup to a cup. We don't need to put 2 pounds down there. They're not going to eat it. If you put 2 pounds down there, that's just more going in the pit. I like the crumbles, and I think they get better intake, but I'll tell you what I think it boils down to. The mini pellets roll real nicely on the mat, right? So they all get pushed over, and it's easier to see that line in the pit of those mini pellets sitting there. They probably push just as many crumbles off, but they scatter. So at least up here, I think I'm doing better, right? But the key thing is you're not going to gain weight. You can't feed enough to add half a pound or a pound litter weight gain. You want them to, when you move them to the nursery, walk into that feeder and eat. So that half cup, it's just getting them exposed. It's a social thing. It's just a natural process of training them to put something in their mouth, smell this, taste this. Oh, mom's gone now, but hey, this stuff smells familiar. Oh, this tastes familiar. I'll eat it, right? It's not a new experience. We've already took a new experience because we took mom away. But we've got this other stuff here that, hey, I remember this from yesterday, right? So then we actually encourage intake. And there are studies that show we get better day 1, 2, 3 feed intake on pigs that have had feed exposure, which is a big deal. So I get your question answered. So water, the most important nutrient. If you all don't know who Mike Brum is, you need to take and get familiar with who he is. He's a great guy. He's been long retired. He was Nebraskan, and he spent a lot of time on feeders and waters. And he's probably one of the smartest guys out there. And that chart up there in the corner is $1 million piece of information for you that you need to know. So flow rate, time to fill a bottle is very important. Water's the first limiting nutrient. It's not what I formulate anything you get from me. First most important thing is good, clean water, plenty of it. And so, water intake's critical. We need to make sure in the nursery phase, we got 20 PSI or less. If those pigs go up and we've got high pressure and they get sprayed, they don't like that. They don't come back. They don't drink. They don't eat, they die. It's not a good combination. Nipple bars, I don't know if many of you are familiar with nipple bars and what they are, but they're a long bar with multiple nipples, and they actually get the pigs looking like a sow. And it's very interesting because you can say, oh, they aren't exposed. How they know this? Put these nipple bars in your nursery pens, wean to finish pens, and you start putting pigs in the pen. It's amazing when those pigs walk in and one pig starts lining up, and then they go to the nipple that's 4 inches apart. They get this socialization. They start seeing pigs line up, and they think mom's there. And both pens on both sides of that fence will line up, and they'll drink. And it really helps with water consumption. One of the biggest things that I'm a big believer in is water acidification. And this can be done whether you have confinement or outside feeding. You just have to have a tank water. But we need to lower that pH down to 4.0 in the water line or in that tank. And by acidifying that, it helps keep your water lines clean. But when you lower that water pH, you lower the pH of the gut in that pig. And E. coli cannot grow in an acidic environment. We're going to talk a lot about things here tonight that can help prevent E. coli. Vaccines and antibiotics are still number one in disinfectant, but being able to deal with it. But using water acidification will help feed intake. It will help prevent E. coli, and products such as Novus Activate DA and Chemins Chemsan are really easy to mix in the water. They're both liquids, and they can easily get your pH down to 4.0. Citric acid's great. It's cheap. It's easy to get a hold of, except most of the time it's not acidic enough to get your pH in your water down to 4.0. You can flip that, please. So another key to successful start, warm these buildings up. Get them up to 82 to 86 degrees. And there's a range there, and I say that if you don't have brooders or heat lamps, you might need to get it up to 88. You got to remember, we're thinking about floor temp, not here. Most everybody's thermostats are registering here. If you've got a temp gun, measure your temp on the floor and think about trying to get that floor to 80 degrees. But 82 to 86, heat lamps and brooders are important. I personally like heat lamps. I don't know about state of Wisconsin, state of Iowa, I know especially. A lot of RECs have discount programs for people that use heat lamps. They will lower your rate cost on nursery facilities or wean to finish facilities with heat lamps versus use brooders. So the cost of maintaining the piece of equipment and the cost of operation, then both ways, the heat lamps are a lower cost. I'm a big believer in mat feeding, whether it's healthy pigs, sick pigs, I like to feed all pigs on mats. I think we need to do that 2 to 3 times a day. There's 2 things about that. It gets the pig up. So if we get all these pigs coming forward to the mat, we can identify that slow one in the back that's not feeling good, it needs to be treated. It really helps with that. It gives us more space. It gives us less, gives the shy pig a chance to eat, gives them a chance to actually get feed into them instead of fighting the feeder. An inch per head of trough space to 40 pounds, or if you're running a nursery to 60 pounds, we need to think about 1.5 inches of feeder trough space. Feed troughs at this point in time should have 2/3 pan coverage. We want feed access. We don't, this isn't when these pigs get 250, 260, and we want a tight pan with only about 15-20% coverage. We want these pigs to have access to feed so they'll eat. We want to make their life easy.
How many days you feeding on the mats?
14 days or so. If I've got challenge pigs, I may feed longer, but 10 to 14 days, try and get to 14 days.
And you start that at day 7?
No, I start that day 1. Day 1. And we don't,
Day 1 of nursery or day 1 of life?
no, day 1 at nursery. We're talking nursery.
Oh,
Yeah,
Day 1 wean.
yeah. And we don't have to,
feed before you wean, right?
well, I creep feed on a mat. Let's talk terminology. Okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
No, it's okay, it's okay. So, creep feeding, I'm feeding on the mat in the Farrow crate. Okay, so now I'm
And
sorry.
that's your half a cup to a cup a day.
Half a cup to a cup a day. So now we've moved on and we've weaned these pigs. And we're gonna feed on a mat. We're gonna have a bigger mat. And I don't know what size pen you have, and it all varies, but you know, if we had a small pen, we don't have to feed a lot, but we ought to feed maybe, if we had 10 pigs, we ought to feed a half pound or a pound. But if we've got 25 to 50 pigs in a pen, I like to feed a good feed scoop, about 2 to 3 pounds. It's not a lot, but it's about access. It's about getting those pigs to move and eat. When they get up, they want to eat. It's getting them up, keeps them healthy, keeps them moving, and it stimulates them to eat. And it also is a way for you to be able to check pigs to see if you've got sick pigs. Does that kind of make sense? So, gruel feeding. We all have different ideas. Rubber pans, black rubber pans, they're great. The red Rotecna snap feeders, they're great. Rubber pans are cheaper. Just do it. Doesn't make a difference what you use. There's no difference in intake. I don't believe it's necessary to do that in all pens. I'm a big gruel feeder in the sick pen. I'm not a big gruel feeder on the rest of the farm. Got labor that needs to do other stuff. Let's concentrate on that sick pen. Plus, it's going to make the most monetarily difference and better survivability anyways. I'm a big believer in the 2 to 3x per day, and I only like to make enough feed where that feed's going to basically last that pen 30 minutes to an hour. If it's 2 hours, it's okay. I don't want it there very long. I want the pigs to clean it up. I don't want an E. coli cesspool. And it's especially important not to have that long. If you got healthy pigs and you run a little longer, it's okay. If you got challenge pigs, you want it cleaned up because you don't want to be trading pathogens between your challenge pigs. So I think that's kind of a very important thing. My stance on gruel feeding is I like runny mashed potatoes. Gephardt's deal, that's fine. I don't have any problem with that. I like kind of consistency. One of the things, if you heard me talk about before in sound nutrition and things on some things like with sows and other things, I use the term, ice cream's great, but some days vanilla ice cream gets the job done, and a good bowl of consistent vanilla ice cream kind of can hit the spot. You don't have to have all this fancy stuff. So I like that runny mashed potato where it's not real sloppy. It's still got some firm. It still holds some height, but it won't completely slump out. One of the biggest things that can help you is get some cherry Kool-Aid, the ready kind that's got the sugar in it, because pigs do like sugar. They like that dextrose, and they do like cherry flavor. So adding some of that cherry flavor to your gruel can help intake. But even if I'm gruel feeding in my sick pen, I still like to have a mat in my sick pen and dry feed on my mat. Feed budgeting. Feed budgeting is very important. It helps get the pigs the right feed they need. One of the biggest things that can cause you added expense immensely is overfeeding. It doesn't return. It adds to your cost. You know, it's like, oh, I can just feed a little more starter. I can feed a little more starter. Well, you know, thank you for your margin money that you paid for the starter feed, but you didn't need to do that. We need to think about keeping you in business and what's great for the pig. You know, simple things, and there's things that come down to logistics these days. Getting a truck there, order sizes and things like that all play into this. But I like to see a minimum of 3 diets to 50 pounds, where we've got some kind of complex starter that's going to be like a 2 to 3 pound per head or 2 to 3 pounds per head type product, and then a 15 to 20 pound diet and a 20 to 50. Ideally, I'd have a 4-phase nursery, but operation size, logistics, and all that plays into effect. Another thing that I do a lot of, and I don't know what everybody does here, but you think about antibiotics, VFDs, things like that. I like to take and set up formulas where I've got the antibiotic in the feed. And so say I'm doing a CTC Denigard pulse, and I need 10 to 14 days, and I want to feed it in that start of that N3, I'll have N3A, that's my base N3 diet, and that'll have CTC Denigard in it, and a budget for 14 days. Then I'll have N3B, that's either plain, Mecadox, or whatever. It's my same base diet, but I'm not overfeeding the diet. I'm controlling my cost, and I'm meeting my VFD requirements because I'm controlling my days on product. So feed budgeting for PRRS positive viremic pigs. I do like to take and feed higher SID lysine diets to those pigs. Like to feed it a little longer. A little added protein is good, helps them through the challenge period, helps them survive, lower intake on those animals. So feeding higher lysine diet still helps me get grams per head a day to those pigs. Nursery nutrition. Well, okay, we've talked a lot about starter form. Mini pellets, crumble meal combination. So I don't know a lot about your operations here, but I'm going to kind of work this back in some ways. Mini pellets are cool. Everybody likes them. They're nice. They make a nice product. There's not a lot of fines in those products. I like crumbles. Crumbles, to me, we get a little better intake than the mini pellet, but if I produce both of those products, got the same diet but having different forms. One of the big deals that I do for logistics is I have a crumble / meal starter where it's 1,000 pounds of crumble and there's corn, soy, fat, etc. added at a toll mill, your farm mill, and that becomes a distance logistics thing. There's a lot of people that I work with that are spread out all over, and getting them even a bulk complete crumble or complete mini pellet to all these different nursery or wean to finish sites is difficult. So that crumble meal combination's nice. It's kind of nice too. I like to see it. Pigs will root in it, get stuck on their snout. I don't think there's any extra gain, but there's a huge advantage in logistically for that. Key ingredients. I'm gonna pick on an ingredient here, and probably some people know who I'm picking on when I say this a little bit too. Steam rolled oats is a good ingredient in nursery feeds. However, it is not an antibiotic that treats E. coli. Fiber and beta glucans are very good in preventing E. coli, but there's a veterinarian group that I think if they could feed a 2,000 pound inclusion rate in the first 2 phase starters would think they'd never have an E. coli problem again. It will help you. It'll give you firmer stools to your piglets, but it will not solve E. coli. Microaid Yucca Shadagra is a great product to have in your starter feed. It cuts ammonia. It's really good. It helps improve average daily gain. And it also keeps that ammonia down in your facility, which keeps health up. I'm a big user of fermented soybean meal or soy protein concentrates. Lowering anti-nutritional factors, I think, is very important. High D is a 25 hydroxy D3 product. So we all have vitamin D in our starter feeds or use vitamin D in our feed, right? If you don't know about 25 hydroxy D, so regular D3 has to be synthesized by the pig through its liver before it becomes available to the pig. 25 hydroxy D3 does not. It's already available. So I feed a combination of regular D3 and 25 hydroxy D3, which helps the pig. And then if I have any challenges, the pig's not losing any production or expending any energy to synthesize that vitamin D3. It's got available D3 to it right away, which is a very positive deal. So early nursery starters, I'm a big deal about pharmacological levels of zinc of 2,500 to 3,000 ppm. That will help control scours. That'll help prevent E. coli. I can tell you I'm working very hard. I work with a lot of pigs in Canada. In 2027, Canada will be like Europe and have a maximum limit of 300 ppm of zinc, period. No early starter, no nothing. Here's life of our rules, and hopefully that doesn't come here. There is life beyond it. It can be dealt with, but it's one less tool in the toolbox. I'm a big believer in lactose. That's milk product in starter feeds. I like my feed acidified, helps with digestion, helps prevent E. coli. I'm a big believer that in starter feeds, we need to look at a 1,4 SID lysine. And if you look at the genetic companies I work for, or also the other 2 big genetic companies, they'll also tell you that your starter feed needs to be at a 1,4. Fat level, fat is not always better. So Dr. Gephardt referred to it a little bit and talked about different levels of intake on these pigs. And I know there's one company that's based out of Nebraska, on a commercial company, that has a good Duroc, but that Duroc has low feed intake. I know some of you show feed guys and gals have animals that have low feed intake. You don't want to have a high fat level. You only want to have about 20 or 30 pounds of added fat in that starter phase 1 or phase 2, because pigs will eat to an energy level. So if we put 30 or 40 or 50, 60 pounds, we're going to reduce intake. And at that age, when we reduce intake, it could be a big problem, because if we have any kind of challenge those pigs are gonna get sicker, easier, have a hard time recovering because they're not eating. You know, one of the things that I first talked about, or had discussions, you know, it's always the veterinarian and nutritionist pointing fingers at each other, no matter who you work for or where you're at. But, you know, oh, let's go out and post these pigs. These pigs are all ganned up and we send them in. Oh, we need to test vitamin levels. Well, I can tell you right now that vitamin levels are going to be low. Well, why? A, they died, and B, they're thin, they haven't been eating. If they don't eat, we don't have vitamins, we don't have trace minerals. So keeping that fat level low to keep intake up early on is very important. So starter feed form, N2, N3 diets. I'm a big mash person. Pelleted's okay. I don't think you need to do it. There's not a whole lot of advantage to it. That N2 diet, I still like to have an inclusion of steam rolled oats, microwave, and fermented soybean meal. N3 diet doesn't need it. I'm still a big person on high D all the way through the whole nursery period. N2, I still think we ought to be looking at pharmacological levels of zinc in at 2,500 to 3,000. Typically, I'm the person, because we're looking at feed intake, that first phase starter feed, I'll be at 3,000, and like the N2, I'll back that off to 2,500 because we also have plenty of feed intake. That N2 diet should have approximately half the level of lactose, because if you think about that, you know, that's a milk product, and I want to transition that pig. I want them to eventually move away from mom. So in that phase 1 diet, I'm about 14% lactose, and then phase 2, I'm about 7, and 3, I'm at 9. Yeah, question over there.
Yeah, that's the first time you brought up the milk side of things, you know, from your gruel to this phase that, you know, do you see that added fat being negative more than it's positive, increasing that appetite and never enticing those babies at all? Or you haven't brought up any, maybe you're not a milk replacer guy and trying to replace any of that colostrum or whatever, but
I'm a big believer in split suckling to maximize my colostrum intake on the sow. I think that's important. If we got the labor, let's do it. A lot of times we don't have the labor. Split suckling is the fact when we have pigs that are born, we're going to have a box where we have a heat lamp. I'm going to take and dry those pigs. I'm going to put half the pigs back on mom, let them drink, let the other ones get warm. And then I'm going to make sure this other half's dry. And I'm going to flip them out, and I'm going to give them about a half hour or so to nurse on mom, hour to nurse on mom by themselves. I'm going to put the whole litter back together. That way everybody has a chance to get on a good teat and get some good colostrum intake. And I can monitor to make sure they're getting colostrum.
How long does mom make colostrum for?
Oh,
24 hours.
Yeah.
24. Okay, so it's just like.
I guess I'm talking more on the
Yeah,
starter
but-
side of things, on that milk replacer
Yeah.
being beneficial at all. Do you sweeten up the pot at all, or is that fat just a waste of?
I like gruel feeding with the starter. I'm going to use sweetening it up, so to speak, would be the sugar and Kool-Aid. I don't like the milk, and there's 2 reasons. A, I don't know if I want that much more milk fats, because I'm going to potentially reduce intake. The other thing about using milk replacer is I've got a lot of milk sugars, and how I talked about making sure that I'm only doing a half hour, no more than 2 hours. A lot of times when we're feeding milk replacer to pigs, it's there a long time, and we've created an E. coli breeding ground. So E. coli will grow very well in milk. And one of the best ways, if you use E. coli vaccine in your water lines for your piglets, is actually putting that vaccine in skim milk to go through your medicator. You can actually grow that vaccine somewhat, and it actually thrives more in skim milk than it does in the water. So that's a couple of reasons why I'm not a big milk replacer person. Now, if I've got a sow that I can't put piglets anywhere to go for, right? Then needs some milk replacement. But so still need feed acidification in N2, not so much in N3. N2 diet, I like to be in that 1.3 to 1.35 SID lysine range. And N3, I like to be in a 1.2 to a 1.25. And again, fat level, more is not always better. That 20 to 30 pounds of added fat is where you need to be at to get good intakes and not cause any intake restrictions. So now I'm going to talk about an interesting concept, and they did talk a little bit about piglet survivability. This is not for everybody, but this is a tool that can save your bacon. Low nitrogen nursery diets. What's low nitrogen? Well, so protein, soybean meal's got nitrogen, right? So what does E. coli eat? What does E. coli feed off of? Does anybody know? Nitrogen. E. coli lives on nitrogen. So we've had these challenges where we've had, I'd call it endemic E. coli that have gotten in some systems where we've lost 10 to 40% post-wean death loss in the nursery phase from E. coli. So we've had to do a lot of things, vaccines, disinfectants, et cetera, But one of the tools that can help you get through this is low nitrogen diets. And so that's a lower SID level. I like to get, especially phase 1 and phase 2, I have little to no soybean meal in it. Most of it's all fermented meal, soy protein concentrate, and that drives down my anti-nutritional factors, and I use a high amount of synthetic amino acids. And we do that in the starter and the N2 diet, and then the N3 diet, N4 diet, we're right back to where we normally were. But that gets us through, and by lowering that nitrogen level, that lowers the opportunity for that highly pathogenic E. coli to grow and can let our antibiotics and our vaccines get us through those periods. But that's not an everyday use. That's kind of a special occasion, but it's a great tool in the toolbox. So, questions?
Back to your pH level, can a medicator do that, or is there more sophisticated?
No, I'm using a water medicator. So I like to take in 10 to 4.
Run
Constantly. And that's a big deal too. And so it's interesting, especially for some of you that may have like show pig operations or whatever, where you're batch farrowing and you're not always got your nursery flow or anything. Cleaning your water lines is really important. So if you think about it, if you've got a nursery or even your farrowing house, drain your lines. If you can run like chem sand or activate through, whether it's the farrowing house or the nursery, like the last couple days, run that through, wean it, shut the lines off, pull some nipples, open some valves, drain that, because we worked with some customers and we had one site that was really challenging. We couldn't figure out why, because we sampled the well and the well didn't have any fecal coliform or E. coli in it, but every group of pigs through that nursery, we were getting just hit unbelievably hard with E. coli, but pigs out of that same flow going to other buildings weren't having the problem. Well, then we started sampling the water line. Well, that nursery was sitting empty for about 5 to 6 days between fills, and that was long enough for that water to go stagnant in the line and grow E. coli. So every time they went and turned the water on and started those pigs, they're inoculating them with E. coli. So, I mean, you don't think of these things and then you think, oh, it's simple, but some simple things like using it to clean your water lines, drying your water lines out, like can be big deals and be big savers.
And what are you running through the medicator now? Like what product in particular?
Novus Activate DA or WD, excuse me, or ChemSand from Chemin. And
But you can only do that if you have nothing on them. Like if you have animals on your system. On the medicator.
oh no, they're drinking it.
Oh, okay.
I want
Not just to clean it.
no, it's not just
Okay,
clean.
gotcha.
I want to acidify that water. It's fine to drink that
Gotcha.
water. It's an actual product that's approved
Gotcha.
in use. So not only is it a pathogen killer, but also you're improving digestion, which improves your feed intake. Any other questions?
All right, you gonna stick around a little
Yeah,
bit?
yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, so we'll continue on. Let's give Dietrich a round of applause. And like I said, he'll stick around and we'll be able to visit with him one-on-one afterwards if you need to. So we're gonna switch gears a little bit and I'm gonna confess a little bit that this next talk that you wouldn't have heard from me maybe even 6 months ago, definitely not 5 years ago. But it's as I shared in opening comments and all that, we talked about the pig livability and the mortality rates of pigs in the United States. And so I was always one of these guys is that sow needs to do her job. I'm going to let her do her job. I don't care if I go out the next morning and there's 7 dead pigs or I got to put 3 in the bucket. And then you know what? That little pig, he's got to learn to live. And, if he makes it, fine. If not, fine. Well, I guess I've softened in my old age. Or maybe it's just the fact that with the little corner of the world I deal in, getting that stupid show pig to where it's being able to sell is really important. And I need every one of them that I can get. Okay. So I want to talk just a little bit about day one and what we need to do to focus when that sow is starting to farrow and that pig is starting to hit the ground. And we'll see if I could. Are you gonna?
Just make sure.
Okay. So I've put a couple comments up there that I've heard in speeches over the last month or so, and it's a change of mindset for me. And it's almost like to the point where I want to admit that I was wrong, which is like really hard. And hopefully Melissa's not watching, that I actually said that in public. But anyway, we have an obligation to take care of our people and our animals. And part of that is doing the right thing on day one to get that young pig off to make sure that it survives and we get that thing off and going and taken care of. So it's really easy. Get them warm and get them on a tee, right? Okay. And what's it take to be able to do that? So we have to have several factors to get them to that point. But it's like, let's help them. And let's make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure that they're warm and they get on that tee. So just not to bring down and bang a dead horse, but it is weighing on my mind of this whole mortality thing in the United States. And one of them, this data was taken. It's Meta Farms on Meta, and it was shared at that conference, and it was comparing us to Brazil. But I'm just going to share the U.S. data. But fact of the matter is, if you look at the whole U.S., when you look at our labor force and all, that we have about 1 person per 300 to 400 sows. Okay. In Brazil, where they have tremendous success in very low mortality. One thing, they don't deal with PRRS, so they're not dealing with that. But then if you look at their labor, their labor is 1 per 100 sows. Okay. So we have 3 times as many sows that our people were taking care of compared. So, and US, we're a great low cost producer. We're not a high efficiency, highly productive producer. And that kind of like irritates me. Like, I want US to be the best at everything, right? Okay, so sow mortality, I've shared with this before. Industry average is somewhere around losing about 12% of the sows on a farm. If we look at the big range from the top 10% of producers to the bottom 10% of producers, anywhere from 6 to 20%. Well, let's get closer to that 6%. And I shared with you at the reproduction workshop there in August that kind of like just rough figuring, losing a sow is losing $1,000. Okay, so let's think about that and try to do those things. And it really comes down to 3 baskets of losing sows: is rectal or prolapses, it's lameness, and then the other third one is unknown. Okay. Okay. So anyway, we have some work to do to identify those. But so we'll just share those sow mortality numbers. Go ahead, advance that, Morgan. Pre-wean mortality, we're losing 14%. The average is we're losing 14% of the pigs that are born on that sow. Most of the time, you look at these highly productive commercial sows, it's almost 3 pigs that we're losing. Okay. When we look at our show pigs, and well, we won't even talk about my pull-ins, but that's not that many pigs. It's 14%, but still, they're all very, very important. And so we can anywhere from a range of 8% to 19%. Okay. When we get into that nursery, we're doing a lot better job. If we get them in that pre-wean and get them weaned, industry average is 3.5, and top 10 and bottom 10. Wow, I like that top 10% guy. Think about that, of losing only 1% of your pigs through the nursery. And I truly think there's probably a lot of us in that room that get that job accomplished, because you get me a pig that, for one thing, we've got some things is at that point in time, we've got that pig off to a good start. We've got that environment right. We've got that, we're weaning a little older. Okay, so we're weaning that 4-week-old pig instead of that 2-week-old pig. That we've got a lot of things that are working towards us and for us to make that better. Okay, and then wean to finish. I can't. This number floors me. That the number of grow finish pigs, because we think that we get that pig to let's say that 50 pounds to 290 pounds, but we're home free, right? Okay, but we look at our industry average is 6.3% industry average, anywhere from 2 to 10%. Okay, this is a study, and I skipped the video, and I'll kind of put up there where to go find it. But Dr. Ashley D. Decker, she works for Smithfield, and a big part of her job, she's a veterinarian. She does a lot of work with Smithfield, and basically her goal is look at systems, process, and procedures that Smithfield does to keep pigs alive. So we're going to share some of her work. But anyway, just the simple fact of on day one, if you're there, if you or your employee or a family member is there in that farrowing house, to be there all day while that pig's being done, we can decrease mortality from 6% to under 2%. How do we do that? Right? Because we're monitoring that environment. We're James, we're gonna hear from James about how to keep these pigs warm, but we're gonna know what temperature is. Okay, how many other times is that? We're gonna hear a squealing pig, right? Or when that pig comes out, we're gonna be there with a towel to dry it, or a drying agent. So it's all those things that we're gonna do, and so this makes sense to me that we can decrease this from 6 to under 2%. Okay, good. Okay, so we need this optimal farrowing crate environment. Nancy, here's your slide. So anyway, we need to But it comes down to, we need to spend all of our time, all of our efforts need to make this optimal environment. And one, that it's warm, that it's dry, that it's clean, and it's draft free. I've been giving talks for taking care of pigs for 40 years now. Okay. Do you know 4 constants that's been in every talk I've given for 40 years are those 4 things, right? Warm, dry, clean, and draft free. We do those 4 things, we're going to win. So we think about that piglet though, it comes out of mom and it's going from her body temperature basically to what? Okay. A lot colder, right? So that is a sudden dramatic decrease in body temperature. So we need to get that little piglet, we need to get that body temperature back up to where it needs to be and get that pig warm to give it the optimum chance of surviving and making it all the way to harvest. So we have to get it and keep it warm. The room temperature, we need that room temperature to be somewhere around that 60, 70 degrees for that sow to be comfortable. So she's not heat stressed. So it's not inhibiting her feed intake any. So we want her comfortable. Now, when Dietrich talked about this but where are we measuring that temperature, right? So it's hard to know. So we need to do some work. And I'm going to play around with this once we turn the heat on with our first sow due Friday. Just think about what the temperature in different places in our barn are, because we really need to monitor that and know what the temperature is at, ankle level up to head high, and know those ranges that we're dealing with to where we make sure that we know what that temperature is for sure.
Are
So
there any studies on whether, like with the piglet temperature, if a heat lamp is better or if a heat mat is better?
Stay tuned. You know what? I mean, I'm gonna say that I think we could make arguments for many different ways, but there's one key: make sure the temperature is right. Okay, so it's more. There's more than one way to get to that point, but make sure you get to that point to where that temperature is what it is. And then that supplemental heat zone, and that we're going to hear here in a little bit. We need to be somewhere around that 98 to 95 degrees for that young pig on day 1 for it to get going. Okay, go ahead. Okay, drying off pigs. How many of us dry pigs off as soon as they're coming out of mama? Okay, how are we doing it? What's that? Okay, so there's several different drying agents out there that do an excellent job. Okay, my bless her heart, Annabeth wants to dry every pig off with a towel, and that thing has to be like spotless clean before it gets set down. Okay, and that's her deal. And then when she's not there, she like monitors to make sure that I'm doing it too, if possible. But anyway, towel drying agents. One thing, and this was what Dr. Dedecker had did, that there's no significant results between the different drying methods. What's important is we're doing it. Okay. Now, the other thing is what she found though, is if we have an optimal farrowing house, like how many of us have perfect farrowing houses, right? Where the temperature is perfectly the same in every crate, where the supplemental heat zone is absolutely perfect everywhere throughout. It is absolutely free of organic material, and it's a perfect, pristine environment. If we have that, we're not going to see a benefit from a drying agent or drying. Okay. But we all know we don't have that, because we all know within our farrowing room, within our farrowing houses, there are different crates that are farther away from the heat source, that are closer to the door, that are close to an air inlet, whatever that factor is that makes that crate less than optimum. So we don't see that. colostrum we talked about, and we talked about that last year during this thing quite a bit, but that is so important. And 24 hours on that sow of producing colostrum for that baby pig. It is that source of energy, that concentrated, really energy rich food source for that baby pig to get up and get going. And then we all know that that's the only source of immunity that that newborn pig is going to get is coming through mom, through that colostrum. So it's important that we make sure that we get that colostrum into those baby pigs. Dietrich, I'm going to show some numbers that disagree with your split suckling deal, but anyway, not to keep arguing with Dietrich, but anyway, it's we ought to debate each other, right? But anyway, we'll talk about that here in a minute, and then don't cross foster because we want to make sure that we're maximizing mother's colostrum to her litter for those first 24 hours. Okay.
Is there anything, I mean, I don't know pigs, but like goats, if you do something stupid with the baby, then the mother doesn't take it? Or is there anything like that with the pigs? Like, do you have to be careful about the mother not?
There are some behavioral issues, but I mean,
Is it usually for like towards individual pigs or is it for towards
absolutely
colons?
Don't say that, Sean. But anyway, it's truly it's very pig specific. Okay, it's female specific. So yeah, but you'll know. Okay. So what it comes down to is we need to assess every pig in every litter, and I said every day, but optimally all day. Okay. Now we can't all do that, can we? So, but that needs to be a goal, and that can be an optimum is what we need to get to. I just put this up here kind of like the end, but and Dr. Gephardt had mentioned that I write these things down. They're excellent resources. And that's where I get a lot of information and go-tos. But the piglivability.org, there is a crazy amount of information right there. And so you can go and look up any life phase and get research and articles and good practical fact sheets on what goes on there. Zoetis.com has a nice little training center for people to go to, and you put in your email and a password. I went through all those modules. They're really good basic information. If you have employees also, or if you bring somebody new onto your farm, another great resource for you to do there. PIC has that whole library as well, and I like using them. And it's basically PIC puts out there what they deliver to all of their customers, all of their farms, and the protocols that they go through. So you can go and see what they're doing to gain information from there. And then I steal a lot from the Iowa Pork Industry Center. So go there and look at their information and a whole library of stuff that's available. Okay. We're going to switch gears here, right? And just want to talk about, and I mentioned Dr. D. Decker with Smithfield, and she's a big time advocate, just like me, of making sure that we take care of that pig properly. And as soon as we get that up there, I'm going to go through a few slides that she's shared. And less is best, or is that just BS? And so I say it's BS. We need to do more. So scroll on down. Yeah, this is not, oh, we're going to get to the meat of this stuff so we can speed things up a little bit. Keep going. Okay, these are all tasks day one. Okay, how many of us give oxytocin for after that sow farrows to let down the milk? Okay, several, right? How much are you giving? Because I have heard some crazy different levels in this report.
1 to 1.5.
Okay, 1.5. Okay, I heard 4 the other day. Okay, so anyway, I think that Alicia's on there. I think I'm going to try to do a little bit of a study on that at one of the universities, and just kind of like do like 3 different no oxy, let's say 2 oxy and 4 oxy to let that and because all we're wanting to do is maximize letting that colostrum down and open up those, those teats to where that the maximum maximum amount of colostrum is available to those little pigs. So I think we're going to try to do some work there. Drying pigs, keep crate dry and warm. Here warms up there a lot, right? Help piglets suckle. My least favorite thing to do and the least patient thing I am, but I'm trying to get ready. Okay, go ahead. Okay, keep going. Okay, keep going. Okay, split suckling and why we do it. And Dietrich explained that where we take pigs off. Okay, we take half the pigs off, let half the pigs nurse, swap them out, and it's trying to help those and we had actually did this, but now with our litter size, we always have more teats than pigs. But what we've done it for is because we'll have a litter of 8 and we'll have 4 monsters and we'll have 4 timid little ones. Okay. And so we would split suckle. So we take those aggressive big ones off to give those little ones a chance. And so in the commercial setting, they're doing it because either one, they have 14 teats and there's 18 pigs. Okay. And in that situation, and there's several do that. Okay, keep going. But that used to be the norm. And now lately with some research she's doing, that she's debating whether that's the right thing to do. And so we're going to go ahead and why do we split suckle? And it's just there's the reasons to increase colostrum intake. And it's been common practice for 15 years. Okay. She done work to try to prove that whether that's the right thing to do. Okay, keep going. She looked at keep going. Okay, so she went and looked at 12 studies that they did split suckling on, and these are large numbers of large trials. She found 8 that showed no benefit from split suckling, 2 that actually were negative to split suckling, and 2 that actually were a good thing. Okay, so why are we doing it if we can't get any more results than that? So she did one last try to convince herself that that was the right thing to do and they should keep doing it. 200 litters. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Okay, we're going to get to this. Okay, so basically what they did is split suckle or didn't split suckle. In the control group, the average daily gain was 5.94. If they were split suckled, it was 5.8. So no advantage at all. Average daily gain was 0.507 for the control, 0.5 for the split suckle. Okay, keep going. Okay, but if we're saving pigs, is it worth it? So we looked at survival. Number weaned, percent pigs dead, no difference between split suckle, not split suckle. Okay. Okay. So does split suckling impact smaller, large pigs? And here's the thing why no, or why we have to question whether we need to be doing this or not. It's hurting those big ones. Okay. We're jeopardizing trying to get the performance of the smaller, weaker pigs, but we're taking away and hurting the large, good doing, healthiest pigs too much by taking them off of that sow. Okay. And then did it help the later born pigs? No. Okay, go ahead. Okay. And then our large litters benefiting, like we talked about, of more pigs and tits. And same thing, no, because we're hurting the fast growing and the larger pigs too much. Okay. Yeah, we can skip. I think okay, so all those trials, absolutely no benefits from split suckling. You do it on your farm, whatever you want, but our time is spent more on attending to those sows and those pigs, making sure that environment's right, and spending that time instead of jockeying picture. Okay. All right.
Are there any studies on like unlimited feed for sows that are lactating?
How much? What limited?
Unlimited feed, like just adding.
So
always
you
having feed
truly you
them?
want to maximize feed intake and get as much feed into that sow, because more feed means more milk.
So you
Okay.
always want her to have.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
Don't want wet, rotten.
No.
Feed.
Correct.
Want
Yeah.
to maximize feed intake, feed it as is.
Just so it's fresh and dry, but offered to her as much as she'll eat during the daytime.
So feed more often.
Yep. Okay. We're going to switch gears and kind of a lead into we met him last year. We can thank Tim Rake for finding James for us. And James has the animal lamps. And I don't know if some of you have seen those, shared those, but anyway, he has some new data and some new information on his product his product is all about keeping that animal warm. Okay, and heat and temperature for that pig. So he wanted to come and take a few minutes to share. We get to give these things. We get two of you are taking these things home tonight to try. So anyway, we'll hand it over to James, and the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. I'm not here to sell these things. I'm here to tell you about how important it is to have a good, reliable heat source those first couple of days. So a few years ago, I started this company, Animal Lamps, and our slogan is "Heat with Purpose," because we want to make better tools for farmers that make it easier to be successful. And so heat is important. You've seen, there's a lot going on that first day to dry the pigs, get them warm. And if you can have some help to do that, that's the best thing you could hope for, right? So we tried to make something that dries the pigs and keeps the crate area dry and covers a larger area. And I use these to actually dry my boots. I realized that they actually were great for that. So it's like this infrared radiation. So there's no light bulb in this thing. It's a stainless steel rod that just gets hot. And it just gets hot and it radiates infrared like what the sun does to heat you. And like when you want to dry something, you put it in the sun will dry it out really nice. This thing does the same thing. It takes the best part of a heat lamp and multiplies it. There's no light that comes off the heat source. We put LEDs that light comes out of this so you can see what's going on below it, but there's no light from the heat source. So it's just a more efficient way to heat an animal. And people are using them in straw and in confinement barns. I'm from Iowa. I drove up from Iowa today, and in Iowa, that's mostly these big producers, and we're in a couple of the big producers in the confinement bit of Farrow and crates. But we see a lot of benefit in a situation like this, where some of these are like 40 degrees, 30 degrees, 20 degrees, 10 degrees. They're just uninsulated barns in people's backyards, and they put these heaters in them, and it really helps them out, and they're reliable and safe. These aren't going to fall out and break in the middle of the night like a bulb might or something like that. So they're a really reliable, safe alternative to a traditional heat lamp. If you go to the next slide, we have this picture, which is, I've got one more, I think, too. One more. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so I try to show these infrared images of the heat pattern. So if you use a normal light bulb, the challenge with a heat lamp, and this works if you use it right, like what Jeff's talking about. If you know when you're constantly raising and lowering it, because you're going to change whether it's really hot here and then it gets cold really fast, or you get it a little higher up and it's a little warmer and a little larger, but then it's maybe not hot enough. So there's a lot of tweaking, and you got to get used to your heat lamp. And then as the temperatures change, you got to be always paying attention to, is that heat lamp doing what it's supposed to do. And so what this thing does is it tries to make it easier. We designed it so you don't really raise and lower it. It just puts out the same amount of heat, doesn't matter how high up it is, you know, within a foot or so, and produces just a larger heat area. So it takes the Goldilocks zone of a heat lamp and just spreads it out. So it serves a larger area. So if you think about, you have a bunch of pigs in here and they're all fighting to be here, that's where they want to be. And are you going to really get enough heat? Is this going to dry all of the litter? Is it going to dry this whole area? And so if you go back a couple of slides, you can see in a Farrow crate, yeah, like this one, how large that is. And in here in a real crate, you can see how much larger that heat pattern is compared to what you'd expect from a heat lamp. So it just serves more pigs. And the point is that, you know, use this or use a heat lamp, but you have to pay attention to making sure you're getting enough heat to the animals in the right amount. You don't want to burn them. You don't want them so hot. You don't want it so cold that it's not doing as much. So we just tried to use some geometry to make it more even. So there's no good spot. The pigs, they all get to be in the best spot. And if we go to another slide. Okay, so then this is the big thing. All right, so this was a production farm in not too far from here in Iowa, though, northeastern Iowa. 20 farrowing or a 20 room facility where there's, you know, 50 sows in a room or something like that. So each of these represents a room, and it's hard to see here, but that number is 16%. That's the pre-wean mortality on this farm. The average pre-wean mortality was 16% in all of the rooms where that heat lamp was, a normal heat lamp. And then, you know, this is a farm that they need pigs to survive. They need to get them out the door. They need to make the money. So this is about industry average, as I understand, 14 to 16% or so. All they did was put those things in. They didn't change anything else, and the pre-wean mortality dropped to 12% on average. I'm not doing anything else. And their scours went down. All these things went down. We think that these things help keep things dry. And that is one way that this some of these diseases spread is from just not being dry. This was 59,000 pigs in this study over a year, 13 cycles, 336 farrowing crates. And so from here to here is a 21% reduction in pre-wean mortality. So that farm would have made an extra $60,000 that year if they had realized this reduction across their entire site. And so now they do have all those in there. Now there's a question about mats versus lamps, and it's really a matter of preference. And you'll see, you know, there's mat people and lamp people. It comes down to how well do you understand how the thing is supposed to work and how well do you manage it. So like with the mats, if they're too cold or too hot, how do you know? You got to be tracking them. You got to make sure, because the environment matters and the temperature matters. The thing that really, probably the most important thing you can pay attention to is to keep drafts out of where the babies are. That is going to be the biggest thing that takes the heat away that you're trying to put back into the animal. So if you put a heat lamp in there, but it's drafty, you're just kind of making things. So maybe some of that cardboard I was thinking about, you could easily tape up, and if you've got some drafts, just seal them up. You'd be surprised at how far that will go. So heat mats, they heat by contact. They don't heat by radiation. They don't heat by infrared. So if you're laying on the mat, then the mat is making the side of the animal warm, and then you're trying to get the heat to transfer through the animal that way. Radiant heat, which is why there's heat lamp people and heat mat people still, the radiant heat seems to help the animal develop better. A little better immunity, a little better growth, because it's directly being absorbed by the mitochondria of the animal in the cells. It's warming them from the inside, it's giving them energy. So we think the reason I got into this was to save lives and sons. I heard they were using these lamps and there are these mats, and nobody liked them. Nobody loves mats and nobody loves lamps, but there's one that's better than the others in people's minds. So I tried to say, well, what's the best way to heat these animals? And it seems like you need radiant heat. It seems like there's an infrared. People are doing it now in the saunas. You know, they're going in the sauna to be healthy. People are getting sunlight outside. So I thought maybe there's something to this infrared, this radiant heat. And then with the mats, it's just I just don't think that they're a little bit of a pain to manage and it's a little bit less. So a lot of people that are doing stuff in their backyards, they'll use a mat and a lamp. It just, maybe they don't use the lamp the whole time. They'll have the mat there and then they use the lamp in the first few days just to make sure things are working. So this is a good option because it's always there and they never break. So it's like if you go to use the lamp and it's broken, you're like, so my spiel here is just to say heat is important. Understand how it's supposed to work. If you're using a light bulb, you got to really be careful because I've been going to these things like this, and everybody I talk to, there's always one that's had a fire. There's always one that lost their barn or their animals or something, and it's because that thing is not designed for how they're selling it to be used. So you have to really be careful with a heat lamp and a bulb because they were designed, as I learned, to keep McDonald's French fries warm. That's like the original source of why a heat lamp was made. They're like, oh, we can use it to keep our fries warm. And it keeps animals warm too, but they burn out. If you don't have that heat, you got a real problem for your animals. And if you don't have a 24/7 care for these animals, like some of these operations do, when it burns out in the middle of the night, especially in this time of year, you're kind of, you're in a little tough spot. So I wanted to make something that was very reliable. So this thing never burns out. It's the same technology as like an electric stove, like that coil. How often do you change those out? Like 15 years or something? I'm trying to make something that lasts a long time, that you don't buy once and buy it again every 2 months or 3 months or something like that. And a lot of these they've had these for 2 years now. Imagine never having to change a heat lamp for 2 years. Like if you're a big production farm, it matters a lot. But so anyway, that's my spiel. Tim Rake is over there. He can come up. He's a customer.
What's up with this guy? He's not even a farmer.
No.
Mad scientist that just has a lot of big words in technology.
I wasn't big enough to work on a farm.
The energy efficiency, if you saw those numbers versus the heat bulb, the safety side of things on a heat bulb, and we all have a big investment. We all have different environments and setups, but in the end, when you start adding up the numbers and then you see on a bigger scale we're all trying to save that one pig. We're talking 4%. That might not seem a lot to you, but then you add up the fire safety and the efficiency. I've converted everything over from that. And it's not to sell them, but good Lord, if you had to build your barn again, do I do it? But there should be, and Iowa does have like a safety rebate coming back to some of these bigger farms, but the numbers you haven't even touched any of the data.
Well, and the nice thing too is that we don't do any rebate stuff because I don't like paperwork and I don't like dealing with the government generally. So like we've avoided, because that was our biggest competition, was farmers getting grants from, but they'd have people do these paperwork. They get the mats for cheap or free, and then they'd have a huge headache trying to install them and doing all this. So we're like, just buy this and we'll make it cheap enough that you don't need the grant. And so it's like,
when you approached, was it QC or just one of the brands to want to carry them? And they wanted to make these to sell parts and fail.
Yeah, they asked me, could you put a switch on it? And I said, well, there is a switch on it. You just plug it in and it works. And they said, well, what breaks on it? And I said,
it's not made to fail.
Yeah, no, he literally asked me what breaks on it. And I said, nothing. Like, aren't I special? And he's like, you're not going to last.
That's how we're making our money.
You're going to go out of business. And I'm like,
there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah. So that's why you can't find them in QC Supply, because I'm like, oh, I'm not going to do business with you guys.
Got a question, so a lot of farms have went to their heat lamps are into their controllers.
Yep.
Because they can change
Yep.
the amount that.
Yep. You can put this on any dimmer switch. You can even buy just a light dimmer switch from the hardware store and just use that to control it. Any controller, anything. Yeah, it's totally dimmable. That's what Reichsview Farm is our biggest customer, and they're converting like, I don't know, a huge amount. They use Maximus control system, and so I don't know if there's
How much less energy than heat lamp does it require?
So you can see there's lights inside, so that's the light part of it. So I was gonna say, we do have a version where if you hardwire them or you wanna use a controller, then you can have the light separate from the heat source. So this goes to 4 wires, and then you can control the light separately from the heat if you want, otherwise the light comes on with the heat. This uses 145 watts of energy, and I tried to, so the guy I was working with to prototype this, they used the 125 watt bulb lamps. When I put that on an actual watt meter, they actually use like 140 real watts. And so I was like, all right, I got 140 watts to work with, because I didn't want farmers to have to upgrade their electrical panels, because you could go really high, you know, make a 200 watt version or whatever. So the size of it, the wattage of it, everything, we prototyped a bunch to meet that 140 watt kind of limit, so that on an existing 20 amp service, you didn't have to rewire anything. You could just plug these in, replace the heat lamp with these things. So if you use 125 watt bulbs, it uses the same energy as one of those. If you use a 175 watt or a 250 watt bulb, it provides the same heat, but it only uses 150 watts or 145 watts. And the reason it can do that is because when you go up to 250 watts, and this is super nerdy, but the wires get hotter, so they glow brighter, and brighter means more light, which is not heat. So they put this red film on the bulb because it's so bright it will blind you, and that's just wasted energy. So that the light is not heating anything. So you go up to 250 watts, you get more infrared, but you'll get a lot more light, which you don't need. You're not trying to get more light. So I just said, all right, let's take the heat part of it and just make heat. And so this is just the heat source. Now, again, whether you want this or not, the whole point of this is that it's really important, and you got to understand it. You got to figure out your heat. And I tried to make it easy by toying around with all these different things. But whether you use a mat or a lamp, the key is make sure it dries your pigs, make sure that they're warm, and make sure it's the right amount of heat, that they're actually under it and they're not fighting. They're all getting heat.
If this were to like fall into a pen for some reason, would it be hot enough to burn them?
No. If it fell on a pig?
Yeah.
Yeah, it might concuss them.
But it's not
The
like
stars.
it starts a fire by.
No, so yeah, the nice thing is the heating element is up, because I debated whether to put a cage on this, because I tried to get rid of anything that you didn't need. You know, why have something you don't need? So they have these stainless steel attachment points. You know, if you use chains to hang these, then they're gonna hang there, and they're not gonna. And we haven't had anybody have any problems with that. If this falls on the ground, it's up inside of it. So I did a test where I dropped a heat lamp and one of these things directly on hay, just thinking, you know, like, or was it straw? See, I'm not a farmer. I just realized, I was like, oh no, it's not hay, it's straw. So I dropped it on straw, and so that thing sat for 20 minutes and didn't start a fire. The heat lamp started a fire in a minute, like literally a minute. In 30 seconds it was smoking, and in a minute there was a fire. And this thing I set for 20 minutes, and I got tired of waiting, so I just stopped the test after 20 minutes. But it was like, okay, that's, you know, it doesn't get as hot as a bulb. It gets hot. You don't want to touch the heating element, but it's not so hot that it's not as hot as a bulb. So anyway, that's what I got.
All right, so what?
Yep.
Is there any risk with the heating element connection, shockproof?
So this whole thing is all grounded, and so as long as you, this is a funny story. There's a guy, Carroll Farms in Illinois. He calls me up, and their pigs are getting shocked. And what he had done is cut all the grounds off to plug them in, because if you know, and you get in these barns, the plugs get corroded, and then so with enough, they went to plug these in. There was a ground plug stuck in from a previous.
Right.
So they had cut these off and then created a short circuit, and he thought it was a problem with the lamps or something. He thought, what do you think's going on? I was like, well, I don't know. What did you do? And then he's like, had them go look. He said, well, they cut a bunch of the grounds off. And I'm like, well, you know, that's how you get shocked. That's what a ground is for, so you don't get shocked. So make sure your ground is plugged in whenever you plug something in. And if your outlet's bad, they're not that expensive. Change them out. You don't want to fire. That's a number one way these fires start, is the corrosion. The connection there is not good. It gets hot, and then that just starts a fire from there, so.
And what height do you hang them?
Just if you have a typical 20-inch or 22-inch divider, hang this just right at the top of it, so it's kind of level with the divider. But anywhere sort of in that range will get you.
Is that the top of that level, top of the
Yeah,
divider?
just to make it all right to the, just enough, so in a Farrow, in a typical, so 20 inches off the ground or so, 16 inches to the bottom, so this is about 5 inches. This little red light is connected to a thermostat. So one of the problems with the heat mats is you don't know if they're working. And so I was like, well, why don't they put a light in these things? So I put a light on here since ours doesn't have light. When it gets hot, that little red light kicks on. So you know just by looking at it that it's hot. It's on a thermostat. So this red light doesn't turn on unless it's hot. So those big farmers, they walk into these big rooms and they could just look at red lights and then go, all right, everything's fine. And then you don't need to walk around with the temp gun because you know that it's doing the job, so.
What's the law?
3 years. It'll be 4 years in April at our first commercial farm.
Really cool comparison. A lot of us have barn cameras now, and you're scanning instead of walking to the barn and back. And yeah, you can see that little light. Yep, it's good. But take mind, it also doesn't have that glow. You look at a camera, it's a blind spot. You can't see what's going on behind them. Until all of a sudden there's a blob, something's flying, what's going on? Then you finally go. But really, it's how it shadows and the light part of it. There's so many other little things like that in comparison to them. But the pigs will tell you where they're comfortable. If it's too hot, if it's too cold, if your barn temperature, and all those little things. And if they're over here, it should be over here. It's just a matter of, this is the common sense they don't teach you in school, that you gotta learn the hard way, or you eventually figure it out, right, Sean? Yeah, maybe. I have a bigger opinion. Okay.
So Tim, customer first, and then
Yes.
he's like, more people need these, you need to get these, and so.
Save one barn fire a year. It's
Yep.
worth it. And just to bring them to Wisconsin as a local, if you need anybody, I know a guy.
Yep.
And it's.
So if you need them or want them, don't talk to me, talk to Tim. He'll show you how to use them. He's got them in his barn. He knows the right way to set all this stuff up too, and he's local here, so you don't have to worry about who to call somebody. So, if you like them, and Fiona is here, she has some paper FAQs and stuff, so she can hand them out in a little bit. And if you're interested to take some more information about these things, and
All right.
Anyway,
Well, he has, give him a big round of applause too for getting that. And he has, as an incentive for those of you that showed up in person instead of on their couch on Zoom, he's given us 2 away. So Morgan has drawn names out of the bowl, and Jerry Furlong gets to take one of these home. And Shannon Wolf.